Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Just to make sure everyone's here. Welcome to this panel. This is a very important subject, and I can tell that it's important to you just by the sheer numbers of people who are in the room, and we only have standing room now. So, a happy future for all children. How do we promote wellness and positivity in our schools? I would like to extend that not just to schools, but also our places of work, our families. So let's think in broader terms today. Remember, the overarching question is how can we take greater collective responsibility for public education? I just want to introduce my role. I'm the moderator today, and I'm honoured to be asked to moderate this panel of esteemed panellists. And usually, I'm a head teacher of a primary school in Wembley, in London. And the resonance of this topic, for me, is that at my school, I believe that children should be safe, happy, and then learning, in that order. So I'm particularly privileged to moderate this panel. So many agree that the role of schools goes beyond academics. Healthy eating, as Stephen knows, physical fitness and emotional needs already form elements of many curricula. Research in some developed countries also show that education and well-being are closely linked. Pupils with better well-being are likely to achieve better academically and to develop more effective social and emotional competencies. Our panel will share their knowledge and experience of where and how this is being done most effectively to benefit our pupils. Our children, let's call that generally. The World Happiness Report in 2016 said that 1/3 of the current global population are now under 18 years of age. It's vital to determine which aspects of child development are most important in determining whether a child becomes a happy, well-functioning adult. And studies that show and follow children from birth until adulthood show that of the 3 key features of child development, that is academic, behavioural, and emotional development is the best of the 3 predictors and academic achievement the worst. This should not be surprising, since mental health is a key determinant of adult life satisfaction, and half of mentally ill adults already showed symptoms by the age of 15. So altogether, 200 million children worldwide are suffering from diagnosable mental health problems requiring treatment, yet even in the richest countries, only 1/4 are in treatment. So giving more priority to the well-being of children is one of the most obvious and cost-effective ways to invest in future world happiness. Professor Catherine Weir, research for the Partnership for Wellbeing and Mental Health in Public Schools, published in 2015, and the research is entitled "What Works in Promoting Social and Emotional Wellbeing and Responding to Mental Health Problems in School." They drew conclusions about the centrality of well-being to learning and school improvement. It can be tempting for schools under pressure to see work to promote well-being and address mental health problems as a luxury or an optional extra. This, however, runs contrary to the strong evidence on the links between well-being, learning, and school improvement, evidence which has recently been brought together by Public Health England 101. Some of the indicative evidence from this briefing confirms children with greater well-being, lower levels of mental health problems, and greater emotional attachment to school achieve higher grade scores, better examination results, better attendance, and drop out less often. Secondly, social and emotional skills are a more significant determinant of academic attainment than IQ. And third, the strong correlation between the quality of personal social health education in a school and the school's overall effectiveness. So schools can be confident that a focus on well-being and mental health not only enables them to provide healthy and happy school environments for pupils and staff and prepare citizens of tomorrow with sound character and values, but also directly supports their more immediate mission, the promotion of effective learning. So the teacher in me would like to ensure that everyone in the room for this hour is going to come away with a strategy that they're going to implement upon return to their organisations and their respective families. We have a responsibility as parents also. I'm going to ask the panellists to introduce themselves with their relevance to this topic. They're going to do so briefly. And can I start with Dr. Vicky?
So thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Dr. Vicky Zakshevsky. I'm the Education Director at the Greater Good Science Center at UC Berkeley. We've been around for about 15 years, and our mission is to translate the science of empathy, compassion, gratitude, awe, forgiveness, mindfulness, happiness into ways people can use the science in their life to build greater well-being. And as the Education Director, I do that for the field of K-12 education. And usually we fall under the categories of social emotional learning, mindfulness, also character education as well.
Thank you. Abdullah.
I thought you were going to do that for us.
No. Please introduce yourself, Dr. Abdullah.
My name is Abdullah Al-Karam. I'm from the Dubai Knowledge and Human Development Authority. We're very known as the regulators, and I think today maybe we'll change that, trying to make you think that we are happy regulators. I will be more focusing today.
Yeah, Mike. Mike.
Is your mic on? Oh, it's not on.
Try again.
Here, go use mine. Here.
Hear me now?
Perfect.
One time I had to do a live TV interview and the battery ran out. So again,
It's not brilliant.
hello?
Yeah,
Okay.
perfect. Thank you. Just a brief introduction.
Take two. My name is Abdullah Al-Karam. I work for the Knowledge and Human Development Authority, for some you know as a KHDA. And as I said earlier, we work with the schools in Dubai as a regulator. But I think today we'll be focusing more to shift your mind a little bit about being regulator and academicians, to look after actually the kids and what makes them happy, and focus not only about their head education, but about their heart education.
Thank you. Alex.
Thank you. My name's Alexandra Harper. I'm from Sydney, Australia. My background is I'm a primary teacher, but teaching and working with children, I realised that I needed to start working with them at a younger age. So I shifted towards early childhood because I realised if we wait too late, it is too late. And the pivotal years are the early childhood years. So my role is to lead curriculum and the student wellbeing in my school, which is called Redlands in Sydney. And I am this year also embarking in a Master of Applied Positive Psychology to enrich my knowledge so I can put that into practice with the children as well.
Thank you very much, Alex. Tony.
Good afternoon. I'm Tony Little. I'm the Chief Academic Officer for GEMS, taking a view of GEM schools right the way around the world. And there are now of the order of 250,000 children in all types of GEMS schools around the world. So it's quite a challenge seeing how things play out in different cultures, different curriculums and so on. Very good fun too. Until the summer, I had previously been head teacher of schools in the United Kingdom for 26 years.
Thank you. Lovely. We're going to hear a little bit more about that, aren't we?
If you're really lucky.
I think that's what they're all here for. Can I start with Dr. Abdullah? Abdullah, what's the H word? And if well-being and happiness present no conflict to the objective of good academic performance, how do we as educators and employers implement the development of next age skills? Also, I've been watching a video of you and you spoke about your Google skill sets. So it'd be useful for you to share some of that with us as well.
Thank you, Vicky. And again, I'm happy to be here. And I'm just feeling that, how's everybody doing? Happy? So I think...
Yeah.
It's definitely me then.
Yeah. Happy but
You still feeling happy? Sounds of happiness. Happy, happier, and happiest. First, thanks for the organizers, Mr. James, Mr. Varki, and James Foundation for putting this event together. I think listening to this morning and the opening speech, and I think one thing that I came so strongly that the world is changing. Everything is around us is changing, at school, at home, everywhere else. So if we're going to start from that and acknowledge that there is a changing world, sometimes we need to change some of our perceptions about thoughts about happiness. So let me to start with one thing. We all grew up with the following statement that happiness, that hard work leads you to success and leads you to happiness. For certain generation, that was true. Life was tough and life was hard. But for this generation, it's changing world. And I suggest to actually bring happiness to the very beginning. So happiness should be a prerequisite for working hard and success in life. Because this generation living in a different time, different worlds, their ambitions, their goals are different than those like us. Also this morning, I think Mr. Farid Zakaria talked about the purpose of education. And I think he mentioned the Latin and the Greece. So actually that's funny because if you today pick up a dictionary and look up the word education in the Latin, it will say something like educarte. It will translate something like, quote unquote, to bring out from within. To bring out from within. So if you look at today where the state of the education to the initial purpose and goal, I think this is a bit too far from what's intended to be. So now, if we go inside and say, how do we bring out from within? I think the education system done a great job in the past. Done a great job by educating our heads, math and science and literacy. It's been all about the 6 inches right here. I think if we start looking a little bit down, 12 inches, and reach to your left side, about your heart, and see, what is heart education should look like? Who's teaching the kids today about courage? Who's teaching the kids about giving? This morning we heard about the refugees and the millions. Now, it's very easy to teach them math and science. Technology is out there. Who's going to teach them how to, when they grow up, to be more resilient? How to forgive and forget? Who's going to teach them how to empathize with others? So I think these sort of emotional and social level of education is what will lead kids to happiness and a better education. Now, if we stay inside and see what makes us different than any other living species, you know that nature of human is to be curious. We're born to be curious. A recent study done by MIT lab showed, on an average, a 4-year-old kid will ask 100 questions per day. 100 questions per day. All kinds of questions, right and left, up and down. I'm not sure they're looking for an answer, but they ask questions. 4 years old as they enter the education system. 6 years later, halfway in their education career, that number of questions dropped to, you're laughing, 10 questions per day. I don't know how many new questions you ask yourself today. So we are born to be curious. So how come the education system don't take that to our advantage? What's happening with exams and assessments is not healthy. It is, in corporate world, death by an audit. You audit and you audit and you audit. Why do we have a system demands answers? Well, if you demand an answer, at best they will gonna give you the answers you taught them. And what if you taught them was not right to them? So I think here's the question is, how come an education system that promotes asking questions, asking new questions, so we can start finding new answers to the changing world that we are living in today? I'm very happy to see that in Dubai, kids are extremely happy. And we have seen the results of when kids are happy, they perform better. In our new project that started about a month ago, School of the Hearts. So we're asking kids, we're asking different questions. What are you having for breakfast? Who you talk to? And one interesting finding came out, a graph between two. When kids eat more vegetable, they feel safer.
Yes, Stephen was attest to that.
And that's actually as a result of Steve Red's work. So things we don't see. Things we don't see. So we're very happy with that. Another statistics I'll put for you is in the late January was the Economic Forum, and they came up with this number. 65% of children in primary education today, 65 of them, will be working in jobs that don't even exist today. So what does education mean to them? I think this morning also Fareed Zakaria put an argument about driving. And 10 years around, people look at, what's something called driving? What is that? Do you need a skill to drive? Because the car drives themselves. And he asked questions about, well, today, the number one jobs in the US is driving, so what will happen? Now I'm going to put the same argument, but differently. What happened when our kids start celebrating 200 years old birthdays? We know now with the 3D technologies, you can print most of your spare part, exception with the heart and the liver, but they're working on it, I've heard so. So most of your body parts will be 3D printed in drawers. When you talk about the genome, and they can sequence any genome for $1,500. Actually, I know somebody in the US, if you send them that, they will send you not your sequence, but they'll send you a picture. This is how you should look. This is how you should look like by now. You pay more to get how you look like in the future. So things are changing. We are living longer. We are adding more days to our lives. But how can we add more life to our days? The key is in the happiness. And I want to finish with what I started. We need sometimes to change our mindset. So I said, happiness is a prerequisite to success. We should not also look at pursuit of happiness, because if we don't know how does it look like, what are we pursuing? So we need to shift that around. And we need to pursue not only happiness, but we should be happy in pursuing our goals. I'll finish up with a very quick story, very short. A kid, when he was growing up in UK, and when he was growing up, his mom was telling him, the most important things for you in life is to be happy. That's what home taught him. Till he went to school. So every teacher asking him, what do you want to do when you grow up? And he keep answering, happy. And they keep getting the same answer back from the teachers. You misunderstood the question. Till this kid became a teenager. So when he became a teenager, once upon a time, the question was, what do you want to do when you grow up? He wrote the same answer he's been writing, to be happy. The teacher answer was, you misunderstood the question. But the kid, now being teenager and courageous, he wrote back, sorry, sir, I did not misunderstand the question. You misunderstood life.
Thank you.
For those who are Beatles fans, this was John Lennon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to come back to you and ask you some questions about some of the things that you've said. But I'm particularly interested in those skills that we can use in our schools, in our places of work, and I'm going to come back to you on those. Dr. Vicky.
Yes.
So my question to you is, how is the science of meaningful life and the curriculum in the Greater Good School? In fact, what is the science of meaningful life and the curriculum in the Greater Good School? And also, you have some examples of elaboration of ways in which we can restore humanity in the classroom. Would you like to share any of your findings?
Sure, yes, thank you so much. So I want to start by going back to the study that you pointed out in your introduction, which I think is an incredibly important study that looked at what were the key childhood factors that lead to adult life satisfaction. And the first was emotional health, and the second was prosocial behavior. And prosocial is loosely translated as voluntary, kind, helpful behavior. So reaching out to others and helping them. And then the least important was, of course, academic success. And I think that this is a critical study because both emotional health and prosocial behavior lay the foundation for building happy and meaningful lives. And we know from the research that people who have a sense of meaning in their life, they tend to do better in their jobs. They also have stronger relationships. They're more goal-oriented. I mean, there's so many benefits to people who have a sense of meaning in their life. And so I also think that this study is really critical. It forces us to ask the question, what exactly are we educating for? What is the purpose of education? Because as we all know, we're all human beings. We're more than a test score. We're more than a job. And the way that our schools are structured these days, it tends to be more about test scores and what job can you get when you're done with school. So the way that a lot of schools now are starting to address cultivating emotional health and pro-social behavior in students is they're implementing what's called social emotional learning. And this is it's a set of skills that teach things like emotional literacy. So being able to recognize emotions, being able to understand them, label them, being able to work with them in a mindful, healthy way. Also teaches things like conflict resolution, so how to build healthy relationships, make good decisions. And we know from the research it's actually quite robust around SEL, so that schools that do implement SEL, their test scores go up. The students have better relationships with their teachers and with their peers. So it's a good thing. At Greater Good, though, we tend to take it one step further. It's not just about emotional literacy and building social skills. We really emphasize the pro-social. So it's how can we teach students to connect with each other, to want to make a difference in the world as well. And we go back to the heart of what it means to actually be human. So scientists right now they're looking at our founder, Dacher Keltner, who's a professor at Berkeley, wrote a book called Born to be Good, and he makes the argument in it that we've built our society, we've built our institutions around this idea of survival of the fittest, of Darwin's. It's all about competition and self-centeredness and greed because we have to do these things in order to survive in the world. And he said, that's actually a misinterpretation of Darwin. When you read Darwin really closely, what he actually said was that our tendency to be sympathetic, to connect to each other, to be compassionate is stronger than our tendency to be selfish, to be self-centered. And so we need to actually cultivate this side within ourselves. And he specifically looks at the science of different emotions that connect us, things like empathy and compassion. And the research on how, so much research now shows that we are actually built to connect with each other. We connect through voice, through touch, through the wiring in our brains, through the release of oxytocin. It's a matter of which side do we actually cultivate. Do we cultivate that selfish, self-centered side, because we have that in us, or do we cultivate that side in us that is actually stronger, which is the side to connect, to be compassionate, to be empathetic with each other. So when we talk about a Greater Good curriculum, it's not a curriculum per se, it's more a lens of how to look at education. We're very good in education at looking at how we educate our children through cognitive, but we don't do it so much through the social and the emotional and this idea of pro-social, being able to connect with one another. So it's looking at the relationship between teachers and students. How a warm, caring relationship is almost one of the strongest predictors of academic success. Also, how can we promote this idea of pro-social behavior through our pedagogical methods? Do students work together? Do they learn to communicate with each other effectively? Also, standalone curriculum. I mean, SEL definitely has standalone curriculum, but it's more than that. It's also how do we build a positive school climate? How do we develop the teachers, the adults themselves who are working with the students? Because so many of us have never cultivated our own social and emotional competencies. So that's a key factor, is really development of the teachers and the school leaders as well. So, yes.
Thank you. I'm sure that there's there is so much to say on this subject, and I'm hoping that when we come back, and maybe the audience will ask you questions about restoring humanity in the classroom as well. So, Alex, as you like to be called, what's been the most significant impact of your student wellbeing DVD?
I think building on what you've been talking about, it's about social emotional learning and how we can make it work on a practical level for everybody in our school environment.
Alex, can you move your mic up?
Move it up?
Yeah.
Is that better? No? I've got a pretty loud voice.
Okay. Use your assembly voice.
I'll use my assembly voice, I'll project. So the video that we developed, or the DVD, was targeting a specific social, emotional and learning strategy, Circle Time, which comes from the United Kingdom. And in itself, it's a great strategy. It teaches children emotional literacy. We all have a common language to talk about social emotional learning, and so it builds connectedness. It's proactive in terms of its skilling up and giving children the sense of agency and the skills to engage with each other and with their teachers and with their parents. So it's been a very powerful experience. And I think the importance of it is seen in the ripple effect of how it actually started. So I'm going to just give a bit of a story now of how this DVD came to play. In that I'm well known for giving people a tap on the shoulder and say, let's go have a coffee. Most people run away because they know that means I'm going to ask them to do something. So I saw a teacher and I said, look, would you like to have a coffee with me? I think we really need to look at the social emotional learning of the children in our school. It was new at the time. There was nothing being done, nothing explicitly. So we sat down and had a coffee and I said, look, I'd really like you to be the teacher that pilots Circle Time within the school. And she was a kindergarten teacher and she said, okay, I'll give it a go. And so with one teacher, and then the other teachers on kindergarten were saying, this is really interesting, what's happening in there? We're noticing differences with the children in the playground. We're noticing that they're more contented. We're noticing a higher engagement. We're noticing that they've got a language to resolve conflict themselves within the playground instead of coming to teachers all the time, a really strong sense of agency. So then all the kindergarten team said, we want to get on and do it. And so they got on and they started doing Circle Time and they dedicated time out of the curriculum. So they made a conscious decision to say, we believe in this so strongly that we're going to put it above other areas because we can see then it translates into academic gains. And so then the other teachers in the K-2 section of the school started looking, going, well, what are kindergarten doing? The kindergarten children are, when we're out on playground duty, being able to play together, they're engaging. And so then the whole of the K-2 section of the school started doing Circle Time. So this social emotional, the benefits of social emotional learning and teaching children explicitly was just taking on a life of its own. So then all of the K-2 teachers they were all engaged. We undertook some professional learning. And so then the preschool teachers said, hey, what are you doing? This is really interesting. So it had a ripple effect. And then the parents were saying, what are you doing, Alex? What's happening there? Can you help us out and tell us through it? So then we started having parent seminars. So in itself, the desire of the community of our school in seeing the benefits of social emotional learning, it took it on a life of itself. And then it rolled out into the junior school and the secondary school. So then we said, well, how can we share this more and ensure it's ongoing? It's just not sitting with the teacher, that one teacher does it and then yet tick, that's done for the year. It needed to be perpetual, ongoing. So we thought we'd develop this DVD. And we were very, very lucky in that the school counsellor, Sam Karakis, and myself, we said, well, let's give this a go and see what we come up with. We'd never done anything like this before. And so we dreamt big and we said, well, we think this is really important. Let's reach out to some key people in social emotional learning in Australia and see if they'll be part of this. And that they were so excited that we were doing this that they volunteered their time. So what we ended up with was a resource that was a DVD that canvassed social emotional learning from multiple perspectives. So we were very clear, Sam and myself, in that we wanted to give all stakeholders a voice because we could see from how the drive for people to want to make a difference was there. So we made sure in the DVD that we had exemplar practice. Teachers want to see what other teachers are doing, what's happening there. And each teacher was interpreting it in different ways, so that was interesting, and it validated their practice and celebrated it. We had parents involved. They put up their hand and were saying, please, can we be on this DVD? We want to talk about how this is now influencing our homes and how our interactions with our children at home and how it's enriched our lives and how our children are teaching us. And that's a whole other story of how you reach out to the community by teaching children who then teach adults. And then we had the experts in the field who then came along and said, you know, we'll be part of the DVD as well. But the key factor is we just said we want to give children a voice. They need to be listened to, and they're so important in this process. So we had children as young as 3 on this DVD, and they could clearly articulate what circle time was, what the benefits were, and how it had changed their lives and how they were teaching their parents and their grandparents what words to use to celebrate happiness, to talk about, you know, life's tough sometimes and, you know, you can't escape that. How do you resolve that? How do you talk it through? How do you bounce back from those times? And so that the children were very proud of their contributions and they talk about it a lot. And so with this DVD we've got now, we share it with our community. The children like to watch it. It's a very hot item that's borrowed from the library all the time. For some of them it's so they can watch themselves, but for some of them it's a bigger picture. And it has ensured that social emotional learning is key, and it's rolled out in terms of ripple effect within other programs within the school, which has led me to introduce beach school and bush school, and that's a whole element of nature and how that's such a crucial aspect to engaging positively with our world and the benefits that it can give there. It's also pushed out into other teachers who have then been able to engage with it to enhance their professional learning. So I think it's just been a really exciting project, and how it evolved recognised the importance of social emotional learning, and the time now is right. Humanity, or what I like to say humankind, because of the kind at the end, humankind are reaching out for this, and children are reaching out for this, and I think it's a really unique time in human history where we're starting to really reassess what is important to be a human, what do we need, and how that will lead us to become even better, each and every one of us. So.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Thank you. Again, with you, Alex, I'd like to come back to all sorts of things that you've just said, but the fact that you've put this at the top, this is a priority.
Absolutely.
And also your methods of dissemination were very interesting. Again, this is about implementation. You know, we're talking about something that we all agree about in the room, really.
Yeah.
And I'm going to forfeit my opportunity to question you, because I know that we've taken a lot of time. But I'm going to, after Tony has had an opportunity to respond to a question, I'm going to turn it over to you, maybe 4 or 5 of you, to create that tension in the room where if you disagree with something, then please put that to the panellists. Or if we're talking about things that we agree, but then how are we going to implement it, again, put that to the panellists. Tony, I've got a question for you. You're the author of An Intelligent Person's Guide to Education. So, how do we make our schools and school children fit for purpose, with particular reference to self-confidence and creativity, when schools are highly accountable for and judged by their academic results?
Well, that is actually a very good question.
Sorry.
Before I get on to that, can I just say that I really enjoy what the other 3 panellists have had to say, and there's a great deal of what you have said that resonates with me, and there are various themes I could pick up, particularly around enabling young people to be more self-aware of what constitutes their own well-being, and critically, I think, also how the way we teach directly impacts children's well-being, and that's not something we tend to talk about enough. But I have a specific question, and I will try to answer it and be specific, I hope, and brief. The question is around confidence and creativity in the face of the dead hand of measurement culture, which seems to have gripped large parts of the world. I've been a teacher for 40 years, and I am honest enough to admit I was pretty slow off the mark, because it took me quite a number of those years to come to a realization that there are 2 underlying truths about the way schools operate, great schools operate. The first is that young people learn at least as much, I suspect more, from each other than they do from adults. And the second is they learn more outside a classroom than inside a classroom. Now, if you hold those two axioms to be true, even self-evident, it should have profound implications for the way you view what a school does, what it is, its function and purpose, which is fundamentally a social thing, as you yourself said in your introduction, that the academic element is some way down the list by comparison with other points. But I think there are two elements that underpin that model of a school. And these, I think, are important. The first, and Alex has alluded to this already, which is key, is respect for young people. I still visit far too many schools which seem to be run principally for the benefit of adults, rather than hold children at the center of the experience. And this can be articulated in a whole variety of ways. But by respect, I mean creating a culture of support. So broadly speaking, it's a yes culture. So if any child has a good idea, wants to develop something in a different way, the school should do its damnedest to try and make it happen. If that means raising money from outside the school to enable a certain type of activity that the school can't run to take place, then so be it. That's where the energy should go. And coupled with that also, I think, is an openness to celebrate the range of activity. I visit an awful lot of schools which are lopsided. And at worst, this can be quite pernicious. I worked in one school where rugby was king, the game of rugby. Everything revolved. The fly half was God. I used to long for the school team to lose. It just mattered too much, and it was taking away from young people's other experiences because it was being focused in this very specific and rather limited way. And coupled with that is the idea of parity, that we celebrate success in an even way. And there aren't many schools I visited where, for example, the child, the young person who leads a social enterprise is given equal kudos to the one who is captain of a top sports team or a star actor. And I think it behooves schools to think through their policy of celebration and what it is young people respect each other for. But there's another dimension to this, and which is equally important. I used to take upon myself as a head the burden of seeing each of my 18-year-old leavers individually. And with a year group of 270 in my last school, it took quite a long time. So these are a whole set of exit interviews, if you like. But it gave me a good snapshot of a generation. And you would remember, as you saw each young person, their journey, their experience. And some of these have been pretty straightforward. A lot of them have been bumpy along the way. But the only ones who worried me, as I shook hands and said my farewells, were the boys and girls who'd had gilded school experiences, the golden school children, for whom it had been very straightforward, always good at exams, always popular, always found the flow easy to deal with. They'd never really had anything significant to bump up against. And I think it behoves all great schools to make sure all their children fail. Not just have the experience of failure, but of course, within a supportive context, learn from that experience of failure. And I think this is an area within the exam culture that we have at the moment. It's a very difficult one to make alive in schools. The stakes are too high in terms of academic work, not least pressure from parents. And just being realistic about it, that's you can't back off. Most teachers will go the extra mile to support students. So it behooves schools to find other ways in which failure can be properly experienced. It may be the way, it's not the fact of being dropped from a sports team, it's how that is dealt with and how young people are enabled to bounce back and find their way to regain that level or even a higher level. So if I may, I'm just going to give one specific example of something that struck me that embodies the kind of thing I've been talking about. I was headmaster of Eton College, which is a big boys boarding school in the United Kingdom. When I arrived there, nothing to do with me, I discovered there was a tradition, an activity, which I thought was stunning. In previous schools I have run or I've taught in, typically in a given year you might have 8, 10, 12 distinguished visiting speakers coming in different weeks, maybe one a week even if you're really well organised. At Eton College in the last academic year there were 260 distinguished visiting speakers. But here's the thing. Each one of those was organised by a 17-year-old. There was no adult involvement in it at all. The contact with a politician, a businessman, an ambassador, a leading sports person was entirely generated by 17-year-olds. The arrangements, who it was who was going to give the visitor supper, where the venue was going to be, advertising to make sure you had a decent audience, dealing with the after party, making sure the person got back to London in due time, and so on. So, and here's the thing, if you're part of a culture as a 17-year-old where it is normal for 17-year-olds to have that confidence, to have that belief in the possible, to reach out and do these things, it is enormously empowering. Now, that is about respect for young people, believing that they can do this. But with it, of course, comes the other side. I was once at a social event in London, having rather a frosty conversation with a man, and I couldn't quite work out why he was being so edgy with me until it dawned on me that he had been approached by a 17-year-old and had visited the school to give a speaker. The 17-year-old had screwed up in a big way. There was an audience of 2, and the whole thing was a major embarrassment. Now, obviously, you want to mitigate the effects of that kind of failure, but it seems to me very important that young people are trusted, even if they're going to get things wrong.
Thank you. Tony, I'm going to pick up, I'm hoping the audience is going to pick up on the risk-taking, the resilience that you've described, connected to the courage that Abdullah described, and many of the skills that we need to impart. As I said, audience, this is your opportunity. There will probably be about maybe 4 or 5 of you that will have the opportunity to ask a question directly to a panel member. Hopefully you can spread that around so it's not the same person who is being interrogated by you. A question that's going to cause some tension, something which you disagree with perhaps, so that we can come away with something where we haven't all agreed in the room. And we have mics for people, don't we? Okay, so can I take, we'll do this in, ladies, where are your hands? Okay, that's nice. Can we start, ladies first, can we start with this lady over here, please? A mic will be coming to you. Or not. Ask your question. Yeah, we've got mics now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can you just briefly introduce who you are?
Yes, my name is Asil. I'm here on my own accord, but I'm an advisor at the Embassy of Japan in Abu Dhabi. And just my question is mainly regarding sort of, we were talking about the scope of early childhood education, and I use this term very loosely, but within a normal framework. So individuals who go to school normally have had normal, sort of relatively normal experiences. But my question is, how do you address, or how do you try to not enforce, but allow young people to experience a sense of positive well-being following traumatic experiences? And how do you try to incorporate that into a schooling education as well?
And that's directed at?
Anyone who'd love to answer the question.
Okay. Alex, Vicky, who'd like? Yes, Alex. Very briefly, because we're running out of time.
Okay. I suppose the key thing for me in response to your question is we want to belong. People want to belong, and I think for children as teachers we need to know each and every child within our school and consider them individually and what backgrounds and experiences they're bringing. There are definitely certain programs or procedures you can follow that are set that sort of outline how to support children who are coming from traumatic experiences. But I think the thing that's always worked for me is just making sure every child knows that they're known and that they feel that they have a sense of value and that they have something to contribute, and you give them a sense of agency and you just actively listen to what they've got to say and spend time with them.
Thank you very much. Excellent. I promised this gentleman over here a microphone so he could voice his question. Thank you, sir. Please remember to introduce yourself.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Arif Rahman from Indonesia. There is no specific presenter that I would like to address to, but anybody of you could answer my question. A certain country, sometimes, not sometimes, mostly, has a philosophy, and that philosophy will define what wellness is. Now, my question is, how can we intervene the politician or the government as well as parents to introduce this wellness according to the culture of that specific country positively, so that the intrinsic motivation will be more powerful than the extrinsic motivation. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Can I volunteer Dr. Abdullah to respond to that question, please? Sorry.
All right, just answer your question. In a recent forum I had with many educators and many also some politicians and all the people you mentioned. So you're talking about the state of education and whatnot. And one of those kids who were helping out in the events, we're having the microphones, right? So at the end, the kid took the microphone and took matter to his own hand, and he says the following. He said, we get it. Things are pretty bad out there. How can we help? How can we help to make it better? So the answer to this has to come from bottom up. It has to come from the kids, of what will make them happy. Because at the end of the day, this is where it starts. So, and I think kids naturally are born to be happy. And we just need to allow that time and space for them. And kids don't understand this nation or that nation or what. We're lucky we have 200 different nationalities in Dubai. So when a kid comes home and talks to their parents, oh, this kid done something, parents asking, where is he from? Okay. And then you keep asking the same questions, and where is he from? And the kid's saying, he's from school. Right?
Absolutely.
He's from school. So we need to let that to take place.
Yes.
But I think unlike anything else we've done education, when it comes into happiness, well-being, character, social, call it whatever we call it, it has to be championed from within and by the kids.
Thank you. That's really useful. And in fact, maybe it could. Oh, yes, the answer.
Thank you.
Maybe it's the case of the children speaking to the politicians, pupil voice, policy level. Maybe we could make that happen.
It's their life.
Absolutely. I'm going to try. Now, I did promise you, didn't I? Sir, can we have a mic over here?
Hi, good morning, everyone. I am Cesar Bona. I'm one of the 50 last year and one of the ambassadors. And I'm really pleased to be here and listening to you. Just some things to add. Epictetus, a Greek philosopher, said many, many years ago that we've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we must listen the double than we speak. And this is what we must apply, especially if we are teachers, right? This is one thing I wanted to tell you, because everyone here is teacher, so we must take it into account. I wanted to say that every single child has had something that all the human beings have, which is the desire to be listened to, the desire to be loved, and the desire to feel useful. So we must give the child a voice so they can speak. Right?
Sir, can I ask you to ask the panel a question?
No, I wanted to add this thing, that we must travel to the kid we were so that we understand them better. This is an obvious thing, that's all. So just to thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Some of us have got a greater journey to travel back to the child that we were. Okay. I'm going to ask this lady over here. Can we have a mic, please? Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Afshin Nawaz. I work as a school improvement advisor in Buckinghamshire, just outside of London. My passion is philosophy for children and doing a lot of work around failure. And we have an acronym which we say it's the first attempt in learning, and really endorsing that from a really young age. Since I've moved into my advisory role, I spend a lot of time in schools in inadequate or category situation. And one of the issues I face is, as much as we say that social and emotional education is important, and it is, I feel like schools in that situation get less and less time to be able to do that because the pressure is so immense from Ofsted or HMI, whoever else it may be. So my question is to Tony, really, about how we can address that.
It's a very fair point, and we touched on this earlier. And in the last 15 to 20 years, it's got worse. And I would personally feel, from a UK perspective, in the last 10 years, but I think this is replicated around the world, it's become tougher still. And that is this grip, which is becoming ratcheted up, and how schools are valued. The more education systems around the world place primary value on a certain limited set of academic criteria, the more other things are going to fall by the wayside. I mean, there's only so many hours in the day, so much capacity for teachers to be able to accommodate it. And what we do need is a big paradigm shift. And this is at the macro level. Either we're going to have a radical rethink where the values inherent in schooling, reflecting what Vicky described as earlier on, what it means to be human, whether they are at the centre of things. Now, I'd love to believe that is possible. I don't think it will be. I just don't think it's going to happen. Or we're going to have fight fire with fire and devise a broader scheme of measurement which in some shape or form is going to accommodate these other aspects that are very important. In other words, call it what you will. Even this sounds so absurd, I can't believe I'm saying it. Maybe this is born of a counsel of despair, but it's kind of where we're heading. We kind of need a baccalaureate which includes well-being.
One last question, and that's a question for Dr. Vicky. So if you have a question for Dr. Vicky, so you're not getting off that easily, can you please, there's a lady behind me. Oh, hello lady. Would you like to stand up and introduce yourself, please? It's the last question, unfortunately. Can I just have, can you tell me how much time we have? 5, thank you very much. 5, thank you.
All right, my name is Ulrike. I'm a education management advisor as well, but on an honorary base and voluntarily here in the UAE, working only with board members and school owners, mainly of local Emirati schools. I wanted to ask you, you were talking about the social skills that actually teachers are lacking. What do you think, and I would ask also Mr. Abdullah about it, what do you think, does it make sense that actually an education board of, for instance, a government gives like a mandatory curriculum to schools that is actually targeting the emotional and social education and also the professional development? Because when I work with schools, actually in the beginning, when I started here before 10 years in the UAE, the school owners would come and say, well, give us a curriculum that is socially, emotionally involved. Now the last 5 years, they're telling me, okay, give us teacher training about this. Now the last 2 years, they are actually saying we need parent training also on this. So I just, I think it's really now in the movement that the whole system of education, which is like the families and the teachers and the students targeting this. I would like to know if it makes any sense, if it comes really to a governmental base and maybe chopping down a little bit of the academics in honor of this emotional education.
I think you can, that's one way to start. I would actually say that it would be more effective to get the buy-in of the teachers, of the adults first. There's a study that showed that teachers who were forced to implement a social emotional learning program but didn't buy into it actually worsened their students' social and emotional skills. So I think the professional and the social emotional learning field is realizing that they actually started incorrectly. They started by developing the curriculum first without considering who was actually implementing the curriculum. And they realize now they should have started with the teachers and the development of the teachers. And so I would say, even forget implementing a social emotional learning program. Start with the professional development of the teachers and particularly of the administrators as well. And if a school does implement an SEL program, one thing that's been found is that support of the leadership is one of the most critical aspects to actually be successful in implementing an SEL program. One other thing that's really important to know about these SEL programs that are out there is that they're all different in their approaches. And some are more teacher-directed, some are more student-directed. Sometimes the skills that they teach are different. So it's really important to make, if a school is going to implement a curriculum or if a government's going to make the decision to do so, it's important that it's a conversation amongst the people who are the decision makers about the teachers who have to actually implement it. Because I think another critical piece that's really starting to come to the forefront of the SEL world is that SEL programs, the way they were designed, particularly the ones coming out of the United States, are very white, middle class, upper middle class values, American values that are being promoted. And we know from the research on social emotional development that different cultures have different ways of approaching emotions, of approaching how we resolve conflict. So it's very complex, but I would say no matter what, start with the adults.
Thank you very much for your question. Thank you very much for responding. I'd also like to convey my thanks to this esteemed panel for taking the time to come here, doing their research, sharing their research, their experience, their knowledge, and also hopefully leaving us with some skills. I'd like to thank Dr. Vicky, Dr. Abdullah, Alex, Tony. Can we give them a big clap, please? I'd also like us to finish. There's no way, as a teacher, I'm going to allow you to leave without your homework. In our quest to take greater collective responsibility for public education, my closing question to all of you would be, how do we connect with each other positively to promote positivity in our schools, our workplaces, and our homes? Thank you.